they took everything from me. My job, my home, my marriage. But when my CEO mother-in-law said, "You're fired," I laughed, because I knew something she didn't. And revenge was already on its way. My name is Amelia, and this is my story. I was a wife, a daughter-in-law, and an employee in a world that was never mine. I was a puppet in a grand, glittering theater, and the puppet master was my own mother-in-law. But puppets, you see, can sometimes cut their own strings. And when they do, the show takes a very dark turn. It all started, as these stories often do, with a fairy tale. I met David at a coffee shop, a tiny, unassuming place tucked away from the bustling city streets. He was handsome, charming, and completely unaware of the empire he was born into. He spilled his latte on my favorite white blouse, and while I fumed, he offered to buy me a new one. We laughed, we talked, and for 3 hours we forgot the world. He was an architect, he told me, a man who built dreams out of steel and glass. He didn't mention that his mother owned the steel mills and the glass factories. He didn't mention that his last name, Sterling, was synonymous with wealth, power, and a particular kind of cold, ruthless ambition. By the time I found out, it was too late. I was already head over heels in love with the man, not the name. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony, much to the chagrin of his mother, Victoria Sterling. She was a woman sculpted from ice and diamonds. Her hair was always a perfect silver helmet, her suits were impeccably tailored, and her smile never reached her eyes. She didn't attend our wedding, sending a terse message about a prior business engagement. David was hurt, but he brushed it off. He was used to her coldness, her distance. He was the spare heir, the one who was allowed to follow his artistic passion because his older brother, Marcus, was being groomed to take over the Sterling Empire, Sterling Industries. Marcus was the golden child, the perfect son, the ruthless businessman. And he was the one who made my life a living hell. After our honeymoon, David and I moved into a beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park, a gift from his mother. It felt more like a bribe to keep him quiet, a gilded cage. I had a degree in marketing and had always dreamed of working in the fashion industry. When I told Victoria this, she laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, like glass breaking. "Fashion," she'd said, her lips curling in disdain. "That's for hobbyists, Amelia. If you're going to be a Sterling, you need to learn the family business. I have a position for you at Sterling Industries. You can be my executive assistant." I was naive. I thought it was an olive branch, an attempt to bring me into the fold. I was wrong. It was a leash. My first day at Sterling Industries was like walking onto a movie set. The building was a monolith of glass and chrome, rising into the New York skyline like a monument to corporate greed. The lobby was vast, echoing with the sound of expensive shoes on polished marble. I felt like a child playing dress-up in my smart blazer and pencil skirt. I was led to the top floor, the executive suite, where Victoria Sterling reigned supreme. The moment I walked into her office, I felt the temperature drop. It was a vast, minimalist space decorated in shades of gray and white. It was sterile, impersonal, and as cold as the woman behind the massive mahogany desk. She barely looked up from her computer screen. "Amelia," she said, her voice flat, "I trust you know why you're here. You will be my assistant. You will manage my schedule, handle my correspondence, and ensure my coffee is always at the right temperature. You will be seen and not heard. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mrs. Sterling," I'd replied, my voice trembling slightly. She finally looked up, her eyes boring into mine. "You will call me Mrs. Sterling. You are not family here. Here, you are an employee, and you will act like one." That was the start of my descent into the underworld. For 4 years, I was a ghost. I was invisible. I was treated worse than the cleaning staff. My boss, my mother-in-law, was a monster. She was a tyrant who ruled her office with an iron fist and a heart of stone. She would make me work until midnight, rewriting reports that were already perfect. She would yell at me for being 5 minutes late, even if the subway was delayed. She'd belittle my ideas in meetings, often saying things like, "That's a charming thought, Amelia, but in the real world, we need more than just charm to make a profit." My husband, David, was oblivious. He was buried in his own architectural projects, traveling to different sites, and when he was home, he was consumed with his own work. He knew his mother was difficult, but he had no idea of the extent of her cruelty. I never told him. I didn't want to be the wife who complained about her mother-in-law. I didn't want to put him in the middle. I was determined to win her approval. I was determined to show her I was more than just the girl who spilled coffee on her son. It was a fool's errand. I was trying to win the approval of a woman who had no capacity for it. Then there was Marcus. Marcus, the golden boy, the heir apparent. He was the VP of operations, and he was a predator. He saw my desperation, my eagerness to please, and he exploited it. He would accidentally brush against me in the hallway. He'd whisper inappropriate comments in my ear at office parties. He'd assign me impossible tasks and then berate me when I couldn't complete them. He was his mother's son, through and through. The entire family was a viper's nest, and I was the little bird that had foolishly flown in. The worst part was the silence, the complete and utter lack of support. I was a stranger in my own marriage. I was an island in a sea of enemies. I had no friends at the office. The other employees were terrified of Victoria and Marcus. They wouldn't talk to me for fear of being seen as consorting with the enemy. I felt invisible. My own husband, the man who was supposed to love and protect me, didn't see the daily torture I was enduring. I don't blame him. I hid it well. I put on a brave face, a plastic smile, and I soldiered on. But it was killing me. Slowly, day by day, it was eroding my soul. I started to see everything differently. The beautiful Central Park view from our apartment was just a reminder of the world I was barred from. The expensive clothes in my closet were the uniform of my captivity. The diamond ring on my finger, a symbol of my love for David, felt like a weight dragging me down. I started to have panic attacks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I'd clutch David's arm, but he'd just sleep on undisturbed. My breaking point wasn't a single event. It was a culmination of 1,000 little cuts. The coffee that was always too weak. The reports that were inadequate. The dinners at her mansion where I was ignored, spoken about as if I wasn't there. "We're having a charity gala," Victoria would say to David, not even glancing at me. "You'll need to come alone. I don't want the press getting any ideas about other companions." The way Marcus would look at me, a smirk playing on his lips, knowing he was making my life a misery. It was this endless, soul-crushing existence that finally broke me. The final straw happened on a Thursday. It was the day of the quarterly board meeting, a high-stakes affair. I had been working for weeks on a presentation for Victoria. I had poured my heart and soul into it. I'd researched the competitors, analyzed the market trends, and created what I thought was a brilliant proposal for a new, eco-friendly line of products. I thought just maybe, if I could do this, if I could prove my worth, things might change. I was wrong. The board meeting was a disaster. From the moment I started presenting, I felt a cold dread wash over me. My slides were different. The data was wrong. The proposal that I had painstakingly crafted had been replaced with something cheap, generic, and full of errors. I looked at Victoria. Her face was a mask of serene disgust. Marcus was smirking. They had set me up. They had sabotaged my presentation to make me look like an incompetent fool. My voice wavered. I tried to salvage it to explain the data, but Victoria cut me off. "Thank you, Amelia. That's quite enough. I think the board can see the caliber of our junior staff." The board members, a collection of older, gray-suited men, chuckled nervously. I felt tears prick my eyes. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I stumbled through the rest of the meeting, a ghost in my own body. After the meeting, I was summoned to Victoria's office. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I knew what was coming. I had already mentally prepared for it. I had my resignation letter in my purse. I was going to quit. I was going to walk out of that building and never come back. I was going to tell David everything, and we were going to get as far away from his family as possible. That was my plan. I had it all worked out. I stood outside her office door, took a deep breath, and walked in. She was standing by the window, looking out over the city. She didn't turn around. She just spoke, her voice dripping with ice and finality. "Amelia," she began, drawing the name out as if it was a bitter taste in her mouth. "I think we both know this isn't working out. The presentation today was the final straw. It was embarrassing. It was a reflection of the standards you bring to this company. I cannot have my reputation tarnished by your incompetence any longer." I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her about the sabotage, to tell her I was quitting anyway, but she cut me off. "Therefore," she said, still not looking at me, "you are fired." And then my phone rang. It was the most perfectly timed thing that had ever happened in my life. The sound of it, a cheerful little jingle, shattered the thick, suffocating silence of the room. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled it out. The caller ID displayed my best friend, Sarah's, name, but it wasn't the name that made me pause. It was the title I had given her a few weeks ago, after a very drunken night. The title was The Fairy Godmother. Something inside me snapped. The months of torment, the gaslighting, the complete and utter disrespect, it all boiled to the surface. I looked at Victoria's back. She was still facing the window, waiting for me to collapse in a heap of tears. She expected a flood of pleas, of apologies, of pathetic desperation. I didn't give it to her. I hit the ignore button on the call. I put the phone back in my pocket. Then, I looked at that ruthless, vindictive woman, and I did the only thing I could do in that moment. I laughed. It wasn't a polite, nervous giggle. It was a laugh that bubbled up from the very depths of my soul. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated relief. It was a laugh that said, "I am free." It was a laugh that cut through the oppressive air of the office like a knife. The sound shocked Victoria. She whirled around, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her perfectly painted lips were parted in a perfect O. She had clearly never had anyone laugh at her before. "What did you just say?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "I said nothing," I replied, my smile widening. "I just laughed. I laughed because you just did me the biggest favor of my life. I came in here to quit. I have my resignation letter in my purse. I was going to politely tell you that I was leaving this poisonous snake pit for good. I was going to be the bigger person and just walk away." I took a step closer to her. For the first time in 4 years, I was not afraid of her. I was done. "But you just fired me," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "You saved me the trouble. You just gave me a severance package. You just made it so I don't have to explain to my husband why I quit the family business. You handed me my freedom on a silver platter. So, thank you, Mrs. Sterling. Thank you for being exactly who I always knew you were." She was speechless. Her face went from white to a blotchy red. "Get out," she managed to whisper, her voice shaking. "Get out of my sight, you worthless little, get out." "With pleasure," I said, turning on my heel. I was ecstatic. I felt lighter than I had in years. The elevator ride down was a glorious blur. I walked out of the Sterling Industries building and into the bustling streets of New York. The sun was shining. The air smelled of hot dogs and car exhaust. It was the most beautiful day of my life. I was free. I was finally, completely, utterly free. That feeling of liberation lasted for exactly 3 days. David was away on a business trip in Tokyo. I decided to wait until he got home to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him in person. I wanted to see his face, to show him I was okay, to explain that his mother was not just difficult, she was a monster. So for 3 days, I pretended everything was normal. I applied for new jobs. I went for long walks in the park. I bought myself a new, beautiful, non-corporate dress. I was happy. I was me again. Then David came home. He walked through the door of our apartment, his briefcase in hand, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "Hey, babe," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I missed you." And then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. The smile on his face vanished. He read the message, his brow furrowing. His face, which had just been happy to see me, slowly hardened into a mask of cold anger. When he looked up at me, his eyes were like chips of flint. "David," I asked, my heart sinking, "what's wrong? Is everything okay?" "My mother just sent me a message," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "What did she say?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. He didn't answer. He just held out the phone to me. I took it with trembling fingers. It was a screenshot of an email from the company's HR department. It was a termination letter, my termination letter. It was full of the same lies, the same hateful rhetoric Victoria had used in her office. Performance issues, lack of professionalism, inability to integrate with the company culture. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was the message David's mother had sent along with it. It was a simple text. It read, David, I told you she was an embarrassment. She was a liability. It had to be done. It's your turn to be the responsible one. Stop playing with your little architecture hobby and come fix this mess. He looked at me. His eyes were cold and distant. I was no longer his wife. I was a problem to be fixed, a mess to be cleaned up. My newfound freedom, my beautiful plan, crumbled to dust. Is it true? He asked, his voice sounding hollow. Did you really make that many mistakes? Did you really sabotage the board presentation? David, no, I cried. It's a lie. She sabotaged me. I was going to quit. I was going to tell you everything. But he wasn't listening. The poison was too strong. The seed of doubt had been planted 4 years ago, and it had finally blossomed into a full-blown, hateful weed. He didn't believe me. He believed his mother. He was a Sterling, and the Sterling blood was thicker than the love we had shared. David, please, I begged, my voice cracking with tears. Listen to me. She's been torturing me for years. She's a monster. Marcus, they did this to me on purpose. Get out, he said, his voice quiet but laced with steel. What? I whispered. Get out of my sight, he repeated. I can't even look at you right now. I need to think. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The man who had promised to love and cherish me was looking at me like I was a stranger. He didn't see the woman he married. He saw the liability his mother had described. I walked out of the apartment, stumbling into the hallway. I had nowhere to go. My parents were in Florida. My best friend was on vacation in Europe. I was alone. I was completely and utterly alone. For a week, I stayed in a cheap hotel, my savings dwindling, my soul crushed. David didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't email. He had cut me off completely. I had lost my job, my home, and my husband, all in the span of a single phone call. The laughter I had felt in Victoria's office felt like a cruel joke. The universe was punishing me for my hubris. I had been so naive to think I could win against the Sterling family. They were a force of nature, a well-oiled machine of manipulation and power. And I was just a small, insignificant gear that they had chewed up and spit out. I sunk into a deep depression. I stopped eating. I barely slept. I just lay in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every horrible memory. One night, in the depths of my despair, something shifted. I was scrolling through my phone, looking at old photos of me and David, happy and in love. A photo of him at his architecture firm popped up. I saw the name of the firm. Sterling Sands Architecture. That's when I remembered the drawings, the sketches he kept in his study at home, the secret project he had been working on for months, the Sterling Tower. It was going to be a revolutionary, eco-friendly skyscraper, a monument to sustainable design that would be the crowning jewel of Sterling Industries. It was David's dream. And then it hit me. It wasn't just his dream. It was a dream he shared with me. He would show me the blueprints and talk about the designs. He wanted it to be the company's legacy, a symbol of a new, green, ethical direction. It was the only project he was truly passionate about. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was the one weapon I had against Victoria Sterling. She didn't care about the environment. She didn't care about David. She cared about money. And the Sterling Tower was a massive financial investment. If I could find a way to stall it, to threaten its completion, I could bring her to her knees. It was a desperate gamble. It was a dangerous game, but it was all I had. I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to fight back. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. I was going to make them pay. So I went to work. First, I needed allies. Sarah, my best friend, had finally returned from Europe. I told her everything. Every single, horrible, soul-crushing detail. She was furious. She was ready to march into Sterling Industries and punch Victoria in the face. I had to calm her down. No, I said, a newfound steel in my voice. That's not how this is going to work. We are going to do this smart. We are going to do this my way. Sarah was a brilliant cybersecurity expert who worked for a major tech firm. She had access to resources that most people could only dream of. She agreed to help me, but she was terrified. Amelia, these people have lawyers. They have power. If we get caught, we are going to prison. They won't catch us, I told her, because we won't make any mistakes. My next ally was Emily, David's younger sister. Emily was the black sheep of the Sterling family. She was an artist, a painter, and had been cast aside and ignored by Victoria for her frivolous choices. She hated her mother. She despised Marcus, and she loved David. She was the only person in the family who had ever been kind to me. She had always suspected her mother and brother were up to no good, but she had no proof. When I went to her studio, looking like a shell of my former self, and told her everything, she started to cry. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew they were capable of this. They're monsters." I showed her my plan. It was a multi-pronged attack. First, we needed to expose the financial corruption at Sterling Industries. I knew Victoria had been cooking the books for years. She was laundering money through several shell companies, funneling funds away from the company and into her own offshore accounts. I had seen the documents on her computer, the data that was hidden from the auditors. It was a crime. A federal crime. All I had to do was prove it. Second, we needed to expose Marcus. He was having an affair with a rival company's CFO, feeding her confidential information in exchange for her. He was selling out his own family. The irony was delicious. Third, and this was the most important part, we needed to sabotage the Sterling Tower. Not physically, but morally. We needed to publicly expose the unsavory practices of the Sterling family, the corruption, the cruelty, the inhumanity. We needed to make it so that no reputable contractor or investor would want to be associated with the project. We needed to make the Sterling Tower a symbol not of sustainable progress, but of ethical decay. For weeks, Sarah, Emily, and I worked in secret. It was like a spy movie. Sarah used her skills to penetrate the company's firewalls, downloading incriminating emails and financial documents. Emily used her contacts in the art world, her social media savvy, and her knowledge of the family's dirty secrets to gather dirt. I, using my intimate knowledge of the company's inner workings, pieced it all together. We made a digital dossier, a treasure trove of evidence that could destroy the Sterling family. The work was thrilling and terrifying. Every creak in the floorboards made me jump. Every unexpected phone call sent my heart racing. I slept with one eye open, convinced that Victoria's private investigators were going to break down my door at any moment. But the fear was a new kind of fuel. It was the adrenaline of revenge. Then came my biggest gamble. I needed to get back into Sterling Industries. I needed access to Victoria's personal computer. I knew she was having a charity gala at her mansion, a grand affair that required her to be absent from the office for the entire evening. It was the perfect opportunity. I called in a favor from an old colleague who still worked in the building, a quiet accountant named Greg. Greg had always been kind to me. He'd once covered for me when I'd made a mistake on a report. I knew I could trust him. "Greg," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I need a huge favor, and I need you to not ask any questions." He listened to my plan. He was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Amelia, this is crazy. This is suicide." "I know," I said, "but I'm already dead, Greg. They killed me. I'm just a ghost trying to get some justice." He sighed. "Fine, I'll do it, but you owe me, big time." That night, while Victoria was charming the city's elite at her gala, I sneaked into the Sterling Industries building with Greg's help. I was wearing a black coat and a baseball cap, a shadow in the night. I took the service elevator to the executive floor. I felt like a criminal, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the security guards could hear it. The executive suite was dark and silent. The huge mahogany desk loomed in the darkness like a tombstone. I walked over to Victoria's computer. I plugged in a USB drive that Sarah had prepared. It was a program that would clone her entire hard drive, bypassing her high-level security. The little progress bar on the screen felt like it was moving in slow motion. Every second felt like an eternity. I was convinced that at any moment the lights would flick on and I would be caught. I wiped my sweaty palms on my coat. I thought about David. I thought about all the pain she had caused me. I thought about the laughter that had erupted from my chest in this very room, and I kept going. The USB drive finally finished its work. I pulled it out, my fingers slick with sweat. I quickly erased the logs from the security system, making it look like no one had ever been there. I left the office as silently as I had come. The next morning, Sarah and I pored over the contents of the hard drive. It was a goldmine. There were emails revealing the money laundering. There were documents showing Marcus's affair and his corporate espionage. There were private messages where Victoria referred to me as that little parasite. It was all there, the proof of their crimes, the evidence of their cruelty. It was time for the final act. We didn't release everything all at once. We did it in stages. First, we made a few strategic leaks to the financial press. An anonymous source tipped off a journalist that Sterling Industries accounts didn't add up. The stock price took a small dip. Victoria was in damage control mode. She held a press conference, assuring the public that everything was fine. A minor accounting error, she said, her smile as fake as her pearls. Nothing to worry about. Then we struck harder. We released the evidence of Marcus's espionage. The story hit the business and gossip columns like a bomb. The headline read, "Sterling heir caught in corporate betrayal." Marcus was publicly humiliated. His fiancée, the daughter of a prominent politician, broke off the engagement. He was forced to resign from the company. Victoria was furious. She blamed David. She blamed me. She blamed everyone but herself. Her composure, her famous icy calm, began to crack. She started making mistakes. She yelled at the board members. She fired her longtime PR firm. The empire was crumbling. And then we played our final card. We released everything. The entire dossier, the emails, the documents, the personal attacks on me. The whole sordid tale of the Sterling family's corruption and cruelty was published on a website Sarah had created, going viral within hours. The public was horrified. The politicians who had been courting Victoria's donations distanced themselves. The investors fled. The board of directors called for Victoria's resignation. She refused. She tried to spin it, to blame it on a conspiracy, on a disgruntled employee. But the evidence was too strong. The truth was too ugly. In a last-ditch effort to save her legacy, she announced that the Sterling Tower project would be moving forward as planned. But no reputable contractor would work with them. The project was dead in the water. The final nail in the coffin came when the city's planning commission, under public pressure, revoked the building permits, citing serious ethical concerns about the developer. I watched it all unfold from my small apartment. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a ghost. I was the architect of their destruction, and I felt nothing. The revenge I had craved was hollow. I had won, but I had lost everything that mattered. David finally called. He was a broken man. He had lost his job, his family, and his reputation. His mother had used him and discarded him. His brother was a disgrace. His dream project was a ruined fantasy. He apologized for not believing me. He said he was sorry for all of it. He asked if we could try again. I listened to him, my heart aching for the man I had once loved. But the love was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard stone of indifference. "David," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not the same person you married. You killed her. You and your family. But you know what? You also gave birth to a new one. A stronger one. A smarter one. I don't need you anymore. I don't need any of you." Victoria Sterling was arrested a week later. The charges were fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Her trial was a media circus. She sat in the courtroom, her silver hair a mess, her expensive suit now looking like a costume. She was no longer the queen of the corporate jungle. She was just a tired, bitter old woman facing the consequences of her actions. I was subpoenaed to testify. When I walked into the courtroom, the press went wild. I was the underdog who had taken down the giant. I was the villain's daughter-in-law, the woman who was fired and laughed. I was a symbol of poetic justice. I told my story. I told the court about the abuse, about the gaslighting, about the sabotage. I told them about Marcus's harassment, and I told them about the moment I was fired. I told them how I laughed, a laugh of pure, unadulterated relief. I looked at Victoria in the witness box. Her eyes were hollow. Her face was a mask of defeat. There was no fight left in her. "Mrs. Sterling," the prosecutor said, holding up a piece of paper. "Your daughter-in-law, Amelia Sterling, claims you sabotaged her career, that you created a hostile work environment, that you had her terminated for no reason other than personal spite. Is this true?" Victoria looked at me. For a moment, the old hatred flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly extinguished. She was beaten. "Yes," she whispered, "it's true." The courtroom erupted in gasps. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. After the trial, Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus was convicted of corporate espionage and got 7 years. The Sterling Empire, the family that had once seemed so invincible, was completely destroyed. The assets were seized, the company was dismantled, and the name Sterling became synonymous with scandal and greed. I walked out of the courthouse a free woman. The sun was shining, the same sun that had shone on the day I was fired. But this time, the feeling of liberation was real. It was permanent. It was final. I didn't get David back. He disappeared, moving to a small town in the Midwest, trying to rebuild his life. I hope he finds peace. I truly do. But I couldn't be part of his story anymore. His story was one of tragedy and loss. Mine was one of resurrection. So here I am. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a corporate wife. I'm not even a Sterling anymore. I dropped the name the moment the ink dried on my divorce papers. I'm Amelia, just Amelia. I started my own small marketing firm with the money I received from the sale of my shares in the now-defunct Sterling Industries. It's small, but it's mine. It's built on honesty, integrity, and hard work, the opposite of everything that family stood for. I still look back at the day I was fired, the day I laughed in my mother-in-law's face. I used to think it was a moment of madness. I used to think it was a cruel cosmic joke, but I was wrong. It was the moment I found my voice. It was the moment I realized that the greatest power I had was not money or status, but the power to walk away. The power to choose my own happiness. The power to say, "You don't control me anymore." They thought they could break me. They thought they could fire me and that would be the end of it. They were so wrong. They lit a fire inside me that day. A fire that didn't destroy me, but forged me. They made me stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I ever thought I could be. They tried to erase me. Instead, they made a legend. And when the laughs are remembered, mine is the one that will echo through history, not because it was the loudest, but because it was the truest. It was the sound of a soul breaking its chains.